F Company, they were in tough shape. I mean, they had gotten caught in an open rice field, and all the officers except one had been wounded. I got a briefing from the remaining officer. He pointed me in the direction which he thought the first platoon was in. We had to get them and bring them back so we could withdraw. To me, it sounded like a suicide mission.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served war zone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. Today, we hear the combat story of Hubert Yoshida, a Marine Corps Platoon Commander from 1965 to 66 in Vietnam with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. He and his platoon fought in the bloody Operation Utah, a significant battle in March 66 with over 700 friendly and enemy KIA. Hubert's fascinating story begins as a child in a Japanese prison camp in the U.S., then volunteering for the Marines, and ends with an exceptional career in senior executive roles in the private sector. He's writing a book about Operation Utah to tell the story of the brave Marines who fought there. I hope you enjoy his story as much as I did. Hubert, thank you for being here and offering to share your story.
You're very welcome, Ryan. I'm really looking forward to talking to you.
Thanks. So we will get into Operation Utah and how you found yourself there in 1966, but I'm really curious to hear how you found your way to the Marine Corps to begin with. And after doing just a little bit of research online about you and your background, I would love to hear a little bit more about where you were the years leading up to Vietnam. What took you into the Marine Corps?
Okay. Well, you know, my generation, I was born just prior to World War II. So World War II had a big influence on my life growing up. You're much younger than I am. So, I mean, the whole country was focused on World War II. We had our victory gardens and all that. In fact, my family was in a prison camp because we were Japanese Americans. So we were relocated from California to Poston, Arizona. And so I spent several years in a prison camp for American citizens, essentially, but of Japanese ancestry. So, of course, growing up during that time, the war was the major topic. You saw it everywhere. And being Japanese American also, you know, I felt the need to kind of prove myself as an American. Does that make sense? Because, you know, we saw all the movies the other kids saw, Dance of Iwo Jima and movies like that. So I guess I always had a desire to be in the military and particularly in the Marine Corps. I went to a university at Berkely, California. And of course, during the early 60s, we started to see a lot of this unrest happening. I was working at the Lawrence Radiation Lab at that time as a lab assistant, and I heard President Kennedy. He came to the radiation lab at Berkeley and spoke, and of course I was very impressed by him, and I was turned off by a lot of the protests and everything that were going on in and around the Berkeley campus. And so as I got my degree, I applied for an OCS or a commission of the Marine Corps, or to go to basic school and get a commission, and I was turned down. And the reason I was given is that my eyesight was bad, but I enlisted anyway. Since I wanted to join the Marine Corps, I went ahead and enlisted, and I did very well in boot camp. Probably because I was 4 or 5 years older than most of the kids that were there. Physically, I was stronger. And so I was one of the top graduates of all the recruit depots. It's called the American Spirit Honor Medal. That's given to the highest recruit of Navy, Marine Corps, Army. And that helped me get my commission. And so I went to basic school, OCS, basic school, and Graduated there at top of my class as well. And, in the Marine Corps, if you graduate in the top 10, you get to pick your MOS, the military occupational skills. And of course, in the Marine Corps, that would be an infantry officer, 0300. And so I was able to choose 0300, and I was assigned to Camp Pendleton.
Okay.
This was in summer of 65. And they were just reforming up this new battalion, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. This was a transplacement battalion that had been aboard ship and been in Okinawa. And so they had a core of very solid troops, junior NCOs, and all the officers who became platoon commanders were some from my same basic school class. And so it was a good outfit. We trained for a year before we landed we went to Okinawa to train for a while, and then we landed in Vietnam in July of 65.
Okay. So if it's okay, I'd like to go back and unpack a couple things here. Fascinating background. The first question is, was there any military service in your family leading up to Vietnam? It sounds like maybe not. And you kind of got this desire to go into the Marine Corps from what you just described, but I'm just curious if there was any military background or history there.
Yes, I did have an uncle who served in the 442. That was a segregated Japanese American regiment. And he was fought in Italy. Of course, on the Japanese side of the family, I had cousins and uncles that had fought for Japan as well.
Wow. What an interesting background.
And an interesting fact is on my Japanese side of the family, they were from Hiroshima, and that was a big naval area there. There was a naval school there. So my relatives there were in the Japanese Navy.
Wow. Amazing. Well, I'm also curious, when you say you spent years in a prison camp, I would almost feel it's counterintuitive that you would want to go and join the U.S. military after that. But it sounds like that almost made you want to aspire to do something different. How did you wrestle with that or handle that decision coming out of a prison camp and then deciding to go and serve?
It happened when I was very young, and at my age at that time, it wasn't really a hardship. I mean, it was kind of fun because I had kids to play with. Because it was hard after I got out of the camp and was returning to normal life that, we ran into a lot of prejudices because we were Japanese Americans. And I guess that just made me want to prove even more that I was an American, I guess.
Yeah. Interesting. And then I want to go back to this story about you enlisting. So you had already gone through college at Berkely. You tried to get a commission. They say no for eyesight, which seems almost comical leading up to the Vietnam War, with the need for people. And then you enlist and excel. And then it sounds like coming out of boot camp, you did so well that they automatically granted you a commission. Is that right?
Well, no. Although I had won the American Spirit Medal, I was assigned to El Toro. And because of my college background, of course, they put me into a data processing unit. That time was just key punches and plug boards. But anyway, I was there for about 6 months or so, and my commanding officer at that time was a warrant officer, and he recognized my story, and I reapplied for OCS and got accepted.
Wow. Okay. So how long did you spend in between that from boot camp going to OCS?
It was about 6 months. Yeah.
Okay. And that was kind of your goal to begin with, was to become an officer and deploy?
And to be in combat, I didn't want, or to be in an infantry unit, I didn't want to be in data processing.
Yeah. Now, I have interviewed some Marines before, and it does not surprise me you'd want to be in combat as a Marine. But where did that come from for you? It wasn't just that you wanted to serve, but you really wanted to be in combat. Where did that come from?
I think it was probably seeing too many movies, I guess. John Wayne.
Yeah.
And, I mean, everybody in my generation saw those movies.
Yes. Nope, but I've heard that before as well. Okay. As you were getting ready to ship off to Vietnam, what was it like at home? Were you married at the time? What were you talking to your parents about? How did that feel for you?
Well, of course, my parents were disappointed that I joined the Marine Corps because I was a physics math major at Berkely, and I had a good job. I was working for Dr. Louis Alvarez as one of his lab rats. But I just felt I needed to do this. And so I left. They wanted me to go to grad school, but I was just sort of burned out on school anyway. So I just wanted to get out and play animal for a while and do things. And do things that I thought would make a real difference. And of course, I read all the books, the Ugly American and things like that wanted me to do something. And I felt I could do something.
How were you feeling about going over to Vietnam at the time? I know it's like that transition from garrison to combat can be exhilarating, but it also comes with its apprehensions. How did you feel about it at the time?
Well, I guess I felt very excited by that. I mean, we had been training for about a year from July, and then we spent about a couple months in Okinawa before I went over. And it was a real good unit. I mean, the Marine battalion, company, platoon, I mean, they're really tight. I mean, you especially if you train together for a year. And I had a good solid core of junior NCOs that had been in the prior transplacement battalion. So I was really anxious to go and prove what we could do.
It's interesting. It sounds like you had a year of training with the people you were going to deploy with, which was not the norm for a lot of people in Vietnam, right? It sounds like, I would imagine, because that's how we worked, that it would be an advantage to have had that time for cohesion and training. Was that noticeable for you going in?
Oh, yes, absolutely. That we would not have gotten through Operation Utah if we did not have that sort of cohesion and trust in each other. There were other Marine battalions that were also in Operation Utah. One of them was the 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. And they had just arrived in country in January, and Utah was in March. And they had, just before they shipped out from the U.S., they had about 400 people that they pulled in from the different posts and organizations around the Marine Corps. And they only trained for about 3-4 months before they were put into combat. And they had one of the highest casualty rates. And a lot of them were NCOs, because the NCOs, they're the leaders, they're the squad leaders, the fire team leaders, and they need to be experienced, and most of them weren't. Some of them had been doing recruiting duty before, some of them had been, color guards, and all of a sudden they're thrown into combat with, and the people in that unit also had just graduated from boot camp and infantry training school, so they were all new. So having an experienced group that had worked together for so long was a real advantage for us.
I'm sure. So if we fast forward then to when you arrive, can you just talk to me about where did you step off the plane or the boat? What was your base like? And did you do a handover with another unit at the time, just to set up the context for what we're getting into?
Yeah, we shipped out after training for a couple months in Okinawa. We went on aboard ship. we made an amphibious landing at Queen Yan. Of course, that was the day before we were to do the amphibious landing. We could see firefights along the hillside, flashes of light going on. But when we, went down the nets and got in the landing crafts, we landed on the beach, and the first thing I saw was an Army sergeant in his underwear drinking beer. So all that firing before was probably just jitters.
Oh my gosh.
So from there, of course, we went out to the countryside. And the first night there was horrendous, mainly because of the humidity, the heat stroke. This is in July, and mosquitoes all over the place. I mean, it was a miserable time. I think troops fell out with heat stroke moving up to this hill. So it was trying to adjust to the country. It took us, I'd say, a month before we finally could move around with any kind of efficiency.
Even after being staged in Okinawa, it was that you still needed to really acclimatize to Vietnam.
Right. Yeah. It was a different type of humidity. I think it was more humidity and more just bugs and things and leeches and all those sorts of things. Also, we were aboard ship for about 2 weeks before we landed. And of course, you get your sea legs, and then you got to get out in that humidity and
So when you landed, and you kind of described kind of moving inland, were you not in a prepared base camp, or were you setting up everything from scratch?
Yeah, we were setting up from scratch. This was in Queen Yan. The ARVN, the South Vietnamese troops had been there, but we were setting up from scratch. We were setting up my platoon set up a roadblock on Highway 1 between two operational areas. South of us was supposed to be the South Vietnamese, and our area of responsibility was north of this place we called Kumong Pass. And so I had a platoon. The first action I had was been about 3 months. Oh no, it was about 3 weeks into this. We had landed. Yeah. And what we had was an outpost overlooking Highway 1. And I noticed that on the South Vietnamese side were several men with rifles, coming in and out of the village and sort of looking like they're setting up a roadblock. So I got permission from my CO, my company commander, to take a squad-sized platoon down there and see if we could capture them. Okay, we went down at night. We set up. We didn't see anything. Couldn't find anything. And so we started walking back in the morning with all the natives or the Vietnamese who were going to market into Queen Yan. So we were walking with them, and all of a sudden they disappear, and we got ambushed. And fortunately, I lost one man and wounded another man got wounded. But we made it back. That was my first introduction to combat there, and it was really frustrating because I couldn't see where the shots were coming from. I didn't know who was shooting at us. These Vietnamese who were our friendlies weren't that friendly, or they disappeared on us. So it was a lesson learned. And when I went back in 2006, I saw a monument where our base camp was. And I could just send you a picture of that, but it's a monument describing how, three, they called them commandos, were able to kill 50 Marines at that spot. 50 Marines was the size of my battalion, and I was there on that date. So they took that in, blew it up into a major victory for the Viet Cong.
Sure. Wow.
So it got a monument to me in Vietnam.
Yeah. So I'm really interested to hear more about this first contact you had, because it sounds like you go into a village, and in fact, one of the, I think the few advantages of the individual augmentee system was that when people were going on patrols, even though they hadn't worked with these other soldiers and trained previously, they had people who had been in country for 6 to 9 months and were attuned to when they're moving through an area and people start to leave and something starts to change. So the new people don't pick it up, but those who have been there for 9 to 10 months are starting to pick up on these things to adjust. I'm assuming you're in a squad-sized element going into a village you had never been in before, and you're moving out, and all of these new things start to happen to you, basically.
Yeah, right, yes. And that's why I said it was so frustrating. I mean, I should have been more aware of what's happening around us. Yeah. And we're still, 2-3 weeks into this, and we're still sort of acclimatizing. We're still on the border of edge of heat stroke and all that going on at the same time.
Can I ask, how did you, to lose somebody on your first contact effectively, how did you rebound from that as a leader? How did your platoon handle it? Because there's a lot of responsibility on you as a platoon leader. This is your first contact. How did you manage that, and how did that set you up for the rest of your deployment?
Yeah. He was the first one killed in our battalion. He was our point man when we were coming back. A lot of self-doubt, a lot of guilt for having been so stupid to go down there and try to do this and not having the experience. But in a sense, it gave us better cohesion. I mean, we learned from that experience. Okay, and it was. I wrote a letter back to the parents of the Marine that got killed, and that was one of the hardest things I've had to do. I mean, so it was. I wrote up a little article on that, and I could send that to you as well if you're interested.
I would. I did read one of your blog posts about your trip back to Vietnam and how you described writing letters back home to the families of those who were wounded. And I was going to ask if that's when you started doing it, was with this particular event. And I sympathize. Like, I can completely understand the potential for self-doubt. You've been high achiever throughout training. You're in combat. This is what you're there for. This happens. But it just seems like you clearly recover from it and learn from it as you're there. So I can't imagine how difficult that must have been at that time. Yeah.
Especially since I had known this fellow for a year, and we had been, one of my better Marines. That's why I had him on point.
Right. Mm-hmm. So with that being your first contact, when you get back to your base, were you intent, like constructing a base camp, or was the intent for you guys to be moving constantly and there wasn't really a situated or stable outpost?
No, I had, like I said, I had the responsibility for this roadblock, platoon size observation point, really. So we were there. Of course, we would run patrols out of there every night, ambushes and patrols. We did have another activity there where the valley next door, where my platoon was selected to set up a blocking position, where we had to travel at night to the blocking position. And at the north end of that valley, then the rest of the battalion was going to sweep it. And so during that operation, I captured about 20 to 30 Viet Cong. And we killed 2 who were trying to escape. And one had a whole bunch of money with him. He had a sack of money with him. Of course, we turned that all into the ARVN, and it disappeared. So
I'm sure.
And then weapons we confiscated also disappeared.
And this was you captured as a platoon that number of people?
Yeah, we had a blocking position at the end of the valley, and they just came running down there, and we corralled them all.
Wow. What was the protocol for that? So you received them, kind of, I'm sure, separate them or move them to another location for further, who knows, interrogation or investigation. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, we rounded them up, and then helicopters came in, and the ARVM took them away to interrogate them.
Wow. So, and from what you said, you guys arrive in July of 65. Operation Utah doesn't take place until March of 66.
Yes.
So what was your experience like leading up to that? Because I know Utah is going to be its own event in your experience, but what was it like getting there?
Well, in the beginning, it was just small patrols and actions against Viet Cong with their rusty old Mausers. We did take, a few casualties due to sniper fire, and actually the country probably hurt us just as much. A lot of just the wear and tear of leeches and immersion foot in the patties, and some drownings. People drown, or you're walking through what you think is a rice paddy, and all of a sudden there's a river running underneath it. So fighting the country is just about as much as the heat and all that. Luckily, my brother was a pharmacist, and he would send me these tubes of things like bacitration that we could use for all our sores and things like that. I mean, the Marine Corps didn't have any of these modern types of antibiotics or things you use in the field. I'm just a tube of bacitration, but people kill for that. So anyway, that we did toward in the fall, we started to hit some major operations. Operation Starlight. There was Harvest Moon, Double Eagle. So there was a number of. We were about 3 months in Quy Nhon. We were relieved by the Korean Tiger Division, and we moved up to Chu Lai, where the Marine Corps is building their major headquarters. And in Chu Lai is when we started to get into the major operations like Starlight, Harvest Moon, Double Eagle. And we're just about on one of these, some of these sweeps almost every month in the last part of the 65. Mm-hmm. Double, in fact, lasted until about 2 days before Operation Utah.
If I can ask, what was a normal day like for you as a platoon leader, platoon commander, when outside of these operations, when you're going out and doing a clearing, or like a movement to contact out at night or just during the day? What was it like for you as a platoon commander? Were you meeting regularly with the other platoon leaders? Were you separated? Like, how often did you see the company commander or the battalion commander?
Yeah, I mean, well, when I was on the roadblock or the observation point, of course, I didn't see the rest of the platoon or company or the company commander on a regular basis. I would hike down there to meet with them. I guess would see them every day, but that would mostly it would be taking care of the men. Making sure that I was concerned about their health and their welfare, and making sure that they're treating their different ailments, and doing some training too. I mean, we still need to be familiar with the country, so map exercises and taking out patrols.
Mm-hmm. It's just any downtime. Was there any downtime for you as Marines? I feel like the answer is probably no, but I'm wondering.
Well, yeah, there's downtime in between. We had to conserve our strength, of course, in this heat and everything. So, but even when you're not doing anything, that humidity is something else. But yeah, there's some downtime, and people would spend that time writing letters or just how Marines are. They just horse around, joke. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, go ahead.
I talk about Marines. I don't know what you see the movies and the mature, men. These are boys. I mean, these are 18-year-old, 19-year-old, just barely down to teenagers. And, they're just out of high school in just a year or two. So these are really kids. But of course, after a month or two, they became the men.
And I would imagine for you were older, as you said, even going into training. So you, even platoon leaders in that day were 23 or 24. It sounds like you even had a little bit of maturity there. So maybe that was helpful within the platoon environment leading these.
Yeah, right. And having gone through boot camp like the rest of the troops, most of the officers go through OCS, but I went through boot camp as well as OCS. And so I knew more, or I related more to how the troops were. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To your point on having 18 and 19-year-olds there, I had just interviewed a gentleman named Eric Breathen, who was a Loach pilot in Vietnam, and he was flying missions there at the age of 19, single pilot. And he just described some of the crazy things people do, especially at the age of 19, and it's amazing. Yeah, there's a lot of responsibility there.
At that age too, I mean, they think they're invincible, that they'll live forever.
That was one of the common themes I heard from Eric was just, I was 19 and felt invincible and did things I would never have done later on in life, which is so true. So if we fast forward, then like you're in, it sounds like Chu Lai through Thanksgiving, Christmas. And then as you move into Operation Utah, could you set the stage for maybe the spring of 66, what the tempo was like? And did you anticipate what was coming for Operation Utah? Could you have imagined, looking back now, what you were getting into, how significant of an event this was going to be?
Yeah, that was a surprise. Well, we had been on an operation through January and it didn't end till the end of February. It was called Operation Double Eagle. There's Double Eagle 1 and Double Eagle 2, and it was a massive joint Marine, Army, South Korean, just seem to have lost.
Yeah,
am I still?
Okay. I got you. Thank you.
Yeah, and we had just come off of there, and then all of a sudden the South Vietnamese, they had their headquarters was in Quang Nai, which was just about maybe 15 miles south of Chu Lai. It picked up some prisoners that indicated that there was a regiment of North Vietnamese that were moving into the area near Chu Lai. Now, Double Eagle, we had some contact, but it wasn't most of the time. They eluded us, so we didn't have any major contact during Double Eagle. But nonetheless, you're in the field and there's wear and tear, and so we were looking to come back and sort of refit ourselves and get ready. And within a day, we were told to mount out again for this. We call it Operation Utah at the time. We named it later. But to try to see if we can make contact with it was the 21st NVA Regiment. And but they decided that this was going to be a joint ARVN and Marine Corps operation, and it would be one battalion of ARVN 1st Airborne Battalion, and their battalion was about 400 men. And then we had 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. We were to be the Marine Battalion. Normally, a Marine battalion would be about 1,000 men, but we went in, and there would be 4 companies, rifle companies. But they decided that they wanted to take one of the rifle companies and give them security of a artillery battery. So we were down to 3 companies. And of course, we had been in country for 6, 7 months. And so attrition had taken its toll. So we were down to about 600 men going in. So a total of 400 and 600, and we're going to go up against a regiment that would have 2,000. Okay, I don't know who did the numbers on that, but it was sort of crazy, and it was very little prep for this. I mean, this was I think they did the first briefing that night, the 3rd, and we didn't get our frag orders until about 4 in the morning. In the meantime, we're trying to get our troops geared up, new ammo, sea rations, find out who's able to mount out with us, and then get down to the helicopter sites to be flown in. We were supposed to leave around 9:30, but we didn't get to the site until about 1 o'clock. Because the earlier waves, I was in H Company, we were the last wave to go in. The earlier flights had gotten shot up. So they were being hit by 50 caliber machine guns. They even shot down an A-4 Skyhawk with a 50 caliber. I never knew that happen. But so it was contested landing. I remember going in on a helicopter, and all of a sudden you could see these blossoms of light coming through the side of that helicopter. All the noise and everything, you can't hear what's happening on, but there'd be a whap, and you'd see these rounds come through.
Like through the side of the aircraft. So effectively, you're seeing the bullet hole. Right.
Yeah. These are old UH-34s. I don't know if you ever flown in those.
I have not. I saw, from what I had read, there was the A-4 that was shot down. There was I think a UH-1 gunship that was shot down early on, and even a 34 was shot down, or crashed at least on landing.
Yeah. Yeah. So Hueys were used as gunships. I mean, they had a platform, they had weapons and all that. But by the time we got there, the Hueys left, and we were just going in as on the UH-34s. They're kind of like dinosaurs, they're kind of big and lumbering things. And I wouldn't want to be a pilot in that, because you're sitting right on top there.
Right. So setting up for this operation, I guess we should also say what you later find out about Utah is, and fact check me here, 600 killed on the North Vietnamese side, 98 Marines, and I think somewhere maybe 30 to 35 killed from the South Vietnamese forces that you're working with. Significant casualties over a 3-day period, March 4th to March 6th. And you are coming right out of a previous op with your platoon. You have effectively a day to reset. You're getting your orders on the way, and you're going to an area, you're being airlifted into an area you haven't been to before. What's your combat effectiveness at that time? Like, how many people are in your platoon going into that?
Yeah, I was down to about 38 men out of, a platoon, reinforced platoon is close to 50 men, okay, with machine guns and rockets. And so even with my machine gun and rockets, I was down to about 38 people, 38 men. And when we first landed, one of the helicopters was damaged, and I was assigned to provide security, my platoon, to provide security for that while the rest of the battalion moved out. They're moving toward Hill 50. And so I stayed there till maybe about 2, 3 in the afternoon, and they're finally getting the helicopters out, and I received a call from my battalion commander. Now, battalion commander doesn't usually talk to the second lieutenant, but he said I had to go and over to Fox Company's area because they had been assaulted and had been split apart, and they lost their first platoon. And so he wanted me to go out there and close the gap with the first platoon and try to rescue them and bring them back so that we could withdraw. So I took my platoon across, and this was all across the open rice paddies. But fortunately, we made it across, and there were 50 caliber heavy machine guns trained on us. I don't know what you fire on the helicopters, but 50 calibers are like little cannons.
Yeah, we have 30 millimeter, and 50 cal is serious.
Yeah. So anyway, we made it across, and I got briefed by the F Company. They were in tough shape. I mean, they had gotten caught in an open rice field, and all the officers except one had been wounded, including the company commander. Their forward observer, which was a lieutenant, was also wounded seriously. So they were in quite disarray. But I received, I got a briefing from the remaining officer. He pointed me in the direction which he thought the first platoon was in. We had to get them and bring them back so we could withdraw. And so to me, it sounded like a suicide mission because the left flank where this was all occurring, the ARVN was supposed to be there, but they had pulled back. And so we were completely exposed on the left flank. So we didn't know, how many North Vietnamese were there. And they were North Vietnamese because we could see them in their uniforms. These weren't the VC. These are North Vietnamese. And they were all had branches tied around them, camouflage and all that. But some things happen that are very lucky and fortunate that sort of turned the course of the battle. While we were trying to locate that other platoon, we were moving forward, and one of my corporals noticed a spider hole. So he dropped a couple grenades in that spider hole, and all of a sudden it flushed out a bunch of these North Vietnamese. And they jumping out of their holes, and there were hedgerows, all crisscrossing that area, and that sort of confined them. You got to realize these are North Vietnamese. They weren't that familiar with the areas just about as badly as we were, although they'd been there earlier. And so we were able to take them all out. There must have been about 20 of them. And it was like shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, that may sound callous, but so we were able to reach the remnants of that platoon that had been cut off. They were non-functional. Those who were still alive were not functional. I mean, there was only a platoon sergeant and a corpsman that were still functional, moving around and doing things. They had been, and there were men with 50 caliber wounds, and you see a 50 caliber wound if it could take down an airplane, you could know what it does to a human body. So there was one man who had been shot. He was carrying a phosphorus grenade on his belt, and that got shot there, and it went off. And he was screaming in pain. The corpsman, it was really bright of him to do this. He got a bunch of water, made mud to cover that wound so that the air couldn't get to the phosphorus. And he was asking for water. And so I gave him one of my canteens. And, thought crossed in my mind that, I may need that water later on today. But so I held back some of that water.
Wow.
And I think back at that and to think, in fact, I didn't even touch that water the rest of the day. So, you do things like this and you kind of think about it later and you think, wow, yeah. I could have done better. But what happened to the platoon commander, he had been caught out in an open field, and he was behind a rice paddy dike along with a radio operator and I think one of his mortar FOs, forward observers. And we tried to reach them, but it was all open. There's no way that we could reach them without exposing it and getting more injured. In fact, one of my fire teams tried to get out there, and one of my men got injured. Oh, I lost my.
Sorry, Hubert, can I want to make sure I understand the context here. So you went from the helicopter site to the company site, the F company, and they were kind of unable to go and recover their platoon that had been separated. So that's your suicide mission going there. You locate a portion of the platoon, but now you've got the platoon commander and radio operator separated as well?
That's right. Right there in the field in front of the area that we were at.
And did you know this platoon commander? Because you were saying you had gone through training with many of the other officers within the battalion. Did you know this person personally?
Well, this is another part of the story. At about this time, the Marine Corps decided that they needed to have a rotation plan. They couldn't have, whole units leave at one time. So they decided to rotate companies out of the battalion. Okay, so this whole battalion that we trained so carefully in Camp Pendleton in Okinawa, we lost the first company just at Operation Starlight, the end of the year. And then in February, we lost F Company. And so this was a new F Company that was there. And I didn't even know that the F Company had changed. I was expecting to see all the officers I knew from the old F Company.
Wow.
So this is a whole new company in the battalion, and then they had just done the changeover a couple of days before, and of course we didn't know them.
Yeah.
But so anyway, that was another complication that we hadn't trained with this company, and their company.
Yeah.
Their company was the lead company because they were the closest to being at full strength. There were almost about 180 men, whereas my company was down to about 135. So, but they were working in a new area. I mean, they hadn't worked with our supporting arms group. So, there's some communication you have with the artillery and the air controllers, and so they were at a disadvantage too. And plus all their officers getting wounded and right off the first go there. Okay.
So you've located the part of the platoon, and now you've got the platoon commander and radio operator separated. So please continue from there. What happens from there?
Okay. Yeah. So when we got to that platoon, they needed to get their wounded out. I mean, the wounded was what's trapping them and holding them there. So I gave my second squad over to them to help move the wounded back to the CP. And I took the other two squads with me, and we went out to see if we could recover the lieutenant who was out there. Fortunately, they had a radio there, and I had gotten a radio from the F Company group when I went out, because we our companies have different radio frequencies. So I had a F Company radio, and I was able to contact the radio man out there and ascertain that although they had all been wounded, the lieutenant was dead, and the other two, they said they're mobile. And so what I did was I laid down some smoke and some covering fire and said, we're going to start this barrage of fire, and when we do that, we want you to come back to our area, because we couldn't go out to get them because it was just all open space. So we did that, and fortunately we were able to get them back, the two wounded Marines back, and then we were able to then pick up the rest of the wounded and evacuate that area. And
so that was your first experience in Utah then, was this suicide mission?
Yeah. And then getting back to the battalion area from there's a patchwork of open rice paddies. So you have to run through that to get back. I remember I told my troops, just run like hell to get back. Don't stop. Don't try to fire. Don't try to return fire, any of that. Just keep moving. So we were able to get everybody back on track, back to the battalion area without any more injuries. Although I didn't know it at the time. Marines never leave their troops behind, even the dead. We try to bring them all back. And unfortunately, I couldn't bring back my machine gunner, and I couldn't bring back that lieutenant because he was still out in the field. My machine gunner was killed during this operation, and we had to leave him there. There's so many wounded to bring back. I couldn't afford to bring back just the bodies.
Yeah.
So that haunts me today. I mean, to leave people out there because you don't know what's going to be happening to them, whether when the North Vietnamese get there. And then that evening we got into a perimeter, and when I was trying to get to scare my part of the perimeter, I had another man killed, shot during that. And once we were in the perimeter, we called airstrikes down, called artillery, and we lasted through the night. By morning,
Go ahead.
The North Vietnamese had left the hill or left the area, and I was very fortunate because my platoon suffered the least of the company platoons. I only had 2 killed and 3 wounded, whereas the other 2 platoons were trying to repulse an attack on our right flank, which was being attacked from a hill. They went up to try to capture that hill, but were overrun, and they lost many more men than I did. I think their one platoon lost 14 killed. The other had lost 6 killed. So about 20 men were killed, plus just about everybody else was wounded. I mean, out of some of those platoons that were like 35, 36 men, there only about 6 or 8 were walking by the end of that. So I was very fortunate in that I didn't suffer the casualties that the rest of the company did.
And you almost mentioned it in passing, but that evening, it sounds like you're still taking fire. You're calling in airstrikes and artillery. What was going on there? Were you in close contact, or were you simply defending a perimeter for the hill?
Well, at the beginning, it was a close contact. I mean, this is already dark. There was a full moon. I remember there's a full moon. The moon had risen in the afternoon, and how those. So the beginning of the night was there's full moon, and we could hear the Vietnamese talking. They were that close, so we were in close contact with them. We didn't know what we were firing at, and we just see muzzle flashes, and we were firing back and forth. There was, of course, mortars going off every time a helicopter tried to land and take out the wounded. They would get shelled with mortar fire. Then toward about midnight or 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, the moon had set, passed, and gone behind the hills, so gave us more darkness to bring in the helicopters. But so we survived that night. And when we were calling in, after the helicopters evacuated the wounded, we called in more airstrikes and artillery. So the next morning, since my platoon was probably the best shape, I went up on that hill where 2nd and 3rd platoon had gotten run over. They had to leave men behind as well. They had left about 5 men back on that hill. And so I went up to recover them. The Vietnamese had gone away and taken off their dead and wounded. Fortunately, these are North Vietnamese, and they didn't mutilate the bodies like the Viet Cong used to do. but I remember one Marine had been sort of drug out of a hole that he'd been in, and somebody had taken his wallet out, scattered it around. A picture of his wife was torn in half, and I just that sort of upset me. I mean, there's no need to do that. And then there was a bomb crater where we found 3 men who were in the same fire team. I guess they kind of tried to do a last stand there, and they were killed. There are 3 corpsmen killed on that hill. Corpsmen, they're a different breed. I mean, when they go into battle, they're not focused on killing people. They're focused on trying to save people. They expose themselves trying to get to the wounded and fix them up and so forth. So we had to have a casualty of corpsmen.
Wow. Did I know Operation Utah lasts another day or two? Were you in contact for that, or was your job to hold the hill and other operations were moving?
Yeah, we were there primarily to be a blocking position after that. And then the 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, they helped the Arvin on Hill 50, and they suffered a lot of casualties too. But that was the unit that had been kind of cobbled together and deposited into the country with only a few months training. So I could understand why they could have had so many casualties. And a lot of the casualties were the squad leaders and NCOs, because they were new to that group. And then to the south of us, the 4th Marines, augmented by a battalion or company from the 7th Marines, 1st Battalion, had another major battle at a place called Antuit. And although their casualties weren't as heavy, I think they only had about 6 killed. But this was a company that was surrounded. And they fought all day and all night. They were running out of ammunition. Helicopter pilots came in and saved them by dropping off ammo, resupply. And those, there's an article about them. I mean, they had about 50 holes in the helicopters, and they dropped off the ammo. They couldn't land, so they just kicked out the boxes. And this was at night, so they're flying at night. And at that time, this was like 8 or 9 o'clock, so they were silhouetted in the moonlight because it was almost full moon that night. So it's a wonder those helicopters, those Hueys, could take a lot of beating and stuff. Not the Hueys, I mean the UH-34s.
Oh, interesting.
We didn't have the Hueys.
Yeah. I'm curious, coming out of that day, did you realize, I would imagine for you, you probably had your own near-death experience that day, or you're watching people die and they're part of your platoon. Did you realize how significant that day was going to be for you later on in your life? As it was wrapping up, were you able to kind of step back enough to see that? Or was it just another day?
Oh, no, it was definitely, something that I think about almost every night. Some things haunt me, like the radio man I got from F Company that went with me to contact, the platoon commander that was cut off. In the rush to get back and trying to get my men back, I don't know what happened to him. Okay. I just, I forgot about him is what I did. And it wasn't until later, and I guess he must have taken off. Fortunately, I've been doing research and I found that he was not killed, that he had made it back safely. So, but, for years and years, I just found out this last year.
Wow.
Haunted me as to what happened to that radio man that helped me that day. Yeah. So I've been making contacts with people. That's part of this thing about doing this book is, making contacts again, finding out, and thanking some people who I should have, considered before. But after that, it was a life-changing event, and was a very traumatic event in my life.
What when you say that you're thanking people and you feel that you should have, who comes to mind there?
Well, one is that radio man that was with me, the lieutenant in F Company that survived and briefed me and pointed me in the right direction to rescue the platoon. I have a squad leader. His name was Ralph Good. He's the one that was able to destroy all that the North Vietnamese that was surrounding that other platoon. I mean, his squad was amazing. I mean, he unfortunately, I found him recently, and he's in prison for murdering his wife's husband or boyfriend, something like that. So, things haven't turned out as good for a lot of the people. And he was my best Marine. He was my best. I mean, I would have staked my life on him. I mean, I don't know the story of how he got into prison and all that. I've corresponded with him a couple times. But I think for the most part, most of the Marines that have gone through there have gone on to live pretty productive lives. Those who survived.
Of course. Wow. Just one more question about the battle itself, and then I think I'd like to move to how you process this afterwards. But I had interviewed another Marine, Elliot Ackerman. He's an author now. He was a platoon leader in Fallujah in 2004 in Iraq. Mm-hmm. Brutal fighting, as you know, house-to-house clearings. Similar event, to just a different environment. He went down to 50% combat effectiveness within 24 hours in Fallujah. Mm. And so trying to deal with that and the morale and knowing that they have additional days ahead of them. What was the hardest part of that for you as a leader at the time? And people don't know this, but you've gone on to the executive ranks in the private sector. But what was the challenge for you as a leader at that time, maybe that at the end of that day or the next few days for you?
I guess it was, trying to review all the things that happened, writing letters, to the casualties because there's the wounded and the dead, trying to recognize the troops that did well. There's always a feeling that, the officers got all the medals and the men didn't. And so I tried to, submit the awards, and sometimes I was criticized for that. But, if you see a guy who goes out there and exposes himself to try to go to the aid of another Marine, that's heroic to me. It's counterintuitive to do that. I mean, it's self-preservation, but not all the awards got approved. I just, that was kind of disappointing to me. It's not to say that, my platoon wasn't recognized. I'm sure it was, but the right people didn't get the right credits for a lot of things. Whereas I've seen others, officers who, I read their recommendations and wonder who came up with that. But,
I think some things have not changed in combat.
yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, if we look back, kind of as you transitioned out, so you did Utah in March. I presume you had another 3 months in country to wrap up your year, 3 or 4 months. Did you end up exiting out of the Marine Corps immediately, coming back home? What was your transition out?
Yeah, well, there were several operations after that.
Okay.
Not on the scope of. There was Operation Hot Springs. There was Indiana. There was several other battles that we went through, but I think in just about a month before I rotated back, I turned it over to a sergeant, my platoon over to a sergeant, and the very next operation he was killed. He and his radio operator were killed with a booby trap. So I came back aboard ship. And when I came back, I had got promoted to captain. I was in the training regiment, infantry training regiment at Pendleton. I had a company, and then actually I was acting battalion commander for a while there. I got a regular commission as a captain, and I was ready to stay, and because I had the combat experience, and I was hoping to go back and have a rifle company. But then, one day I was duty officer, and at night, and I got a telegram come in that said one of the Marines had been badly wounded, and the wife still lived near the base, and if I could go and notify her. I called the chaplain to see if he would come with me, and he couldn't come. So I went there. I took my wife because, this was a young girl. I think she was like 18 or 19. And we went to visit her. And you could see the color drain from her face as soon as she saw me in uniform coming up. I was glad that my wife came with me because she was very, very, good, comforting for a young lady because she was all alone. But, I looked at that and I realized what effect this had on our wives. In those days, we didn't have internet or anything like that, so it was by mail. In some ways, it's better because, it took maybe a week or two to turn around a letter, and what you put in a letter, you edit, and you don't complain about the kids or the car payments or anything like that, like I guess the troops have to contend with today. But even then, there was this, they didn't know what was going on. And to put my wife through another one of those, I thought, well, I can't do that to her. So I resigned my commission, and fortunately, I joined IBM. Yeah.
Wow. It feels like that was a very difficult decision. What was it?
Yes, I mean, I had put together a pretty good Marine Corps resume, as it were.
I'm sure.
I was scheduled to be the commanding officer at Pickle Meadows. That's a escape and evasion school up in the Sierras. Of course, that meant my wife would have to go up there, and it's an pretty isolated area.
Yeah.
So, at that time, I decided my wife was more important to me than the Marine Corps or doing anything else in the Marine Corps.
Yeah. So fast forwarding to 2016, I read something that you written about taking a business trip back to Vietnam and then actually going back to the area, finding somebody a Vietnamese person
Yes.
who was there during the events. Could you just talk to me about what it felt like going back there? I had gone back with my father, and it was a pretty moving event. I'd love to hear it from your side.
Well, the area had changed completely. It was not recognizable to me. If you realize back in 1966, the hills were more barren. because for centuries, people have been woodcutters have been chopping down trees and making charcoal because that was their only fuel that they had. So the hills were pretty barren. Plus, we had done a lot of bombing and Agent Orange and all that. So it was pretty bare. But when I went back there, there was a new canal that was dug through the valley. They had reforested all the hills. The towns, of course, were bigger now. They weren't just little hamlets, villages. It was really unrecognizable. Although I had this Vietnamese, I had to go through an interpreter, and I couldn't ask the more personal types of questions, and I don't know if they could answer that either. But I walked through some of the areas. What's a good thing afterwards I found out is that, as I took pictures on my iPhone, there are apps where you can get the grid coordinates of that, and I can map it out to the maps that I had in those days. So that's how afterwards I came back and I found out where I was, and I was off. The hills that I thought were the hills I had fought on were not the ones that I thought I was on.
Yeah.
And, everything had overgrown. You didn't see, there were some bomb craters that were still there, but it's all different and changed. And I did find a cemetery where the North Vietnamese had been buried, some of them, and it was very near the battle area. I don't know if they're the same troops that were there before. When I went back to that first area, that Kumong, where I had that outpost and I climbed that hill, and of course everything was overgrown. I could hear semis roaring up and down Highway 1. In fact, there's this app called Pokemon that my nephew had, and so I put it on my iPhone in the States. And then when I was out there, I actually had a Pokemon notification while I was going up that hill. It's the craziest thing. But I didn't make it up to the top of the hill, but I couldn't recognize anything. I just didn't recognize anything at all. Maybe if I had gone there with other veterans who we could reminisce with. I mean, in a sense, I guess it was kind of, I didn't see the things that I expected to see because everything had just changed so much. But I was glad in that life went on and that they seem to have a better life now. I mean, they have electricity there. They have, propane. They don't have to chop wood and create charcoal to fuel their lives. And the Vietnamese people seem to have no animosity to Americans. I did go to Chu Chi, is it? The American tunnels of Cu Chi. And I know there's a museum there, and of course the museum is full of propaganda films and all that. I imagine you must have gone to some of those museums. Yeah. But, I worked with the people in Vietnam, and most of the business people are in the 20s, 30s and 40s, and they have no idea of the war. And they all seem to have a very good impression of Americans. I went to a restaurant where they had taken President Obama, and they had pictures of him on the wall. And he was very popular there in Vietnam.
And I read this gentleman that you met there who I think he wasn't fighting at the time, but he may have been aiding the North Vietnamese, and then you had tea with him. How did you harbor any animosity coming out of the war that changed over time?
No.
How did you deal with that?
No animosity at all. For me, it was rather strange sometimes because the Vietnamese look a lot like Japanese. The little kids there, they look like my little nieces and nephews, and they come running around, and they're Asian people, and I felt I related to them. I didn't have any animosity at all. Maybe for me it was a little bit different. I know some of the veterans have come back, have been very bitter. I mean, especially if they've seen some atrocities or the best friends being killed closely. But that's not my experience.
Yeah. And I know you've written a bit about how important it was to, see your own family grow, and how difficult it was to think of these other families who lost their
Mm-hmm.
children in combat, not just the Americans, but also you described that cemetery in Vietnam where these people are buried far from their homes. So it's not even easy for their families to come visit the grave sites. I wonder, as a father of 3 boys, how did you talk to your family, children about that experience for you? Did you want to guide them into the military? Did you not? Did you just want them to make their own choices?
Yeah, no, I never gave any guidance to my son about my children. In fact, I think up until recently, I rarely spoke about this to my family or my kids. My wife, I did originally when I first came back. Things were fresh. It was kind of frightening for her because I would have nightmares, and one day she claims I was choking her at night. So it's kind of frightening, but that's all gone. When the first Kuwait invasion came up, my son Michael was playing water polo for UC Santa Cruz, and we were at a meet, and all these young men, healthy young men, just playing at athletic events, water polo. I was just thinking, what if there was a war and they were all there and coming back in body bags? And, that really frightened me. And I guess I would consider having him go to Canada, I guess, to that. Fortunately, he didn't have to go, or I didn't encourage him to do anything like that. It's different when you're a parent, right? It's
very. I had a 6-month-old son when I deployed, and I feel like, I don't know what it was like to deploy without a kid. But I feel very strongly that changed some of my decision-making at the time. It just weighs on you differently as a parent.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, looking back at what you did, the people you interacted with, the experiences you had, and then what you've dealt with since, would you have gone back to your 23 or 4-year-old self and advised a different path, or would you have done it again?
Yes, I would have done it again.
Despite the difficulties.
Yeah, I guess it's... I would do it again. It was just a chance to prove myself, as it were. I mean, all young men, you want to prove yourself, make your mark, I guess. I would do it again. I was really proud to have been in the Marine Corps and have been in Vietnam.
When you came back, you said you didn't talk about it often. I don't know if your uncle, who fought in World War II, as you described it, if he was still alive, did you talk about that with anybody?
I could have talked to my uncle about that, and see, he was wounded in Italy. So I wish I could have talked to him more. Of course, no, I never really had a chance to talk to him. I regret that very much.
And I remember what I wanted to ask you. You mentioned that you've only recently started talking about this. What what changed things to make you want to talk more or be more open to talking about these experiences?
I guess is that the chance I had to go back in 2016 and visit some of the area that triggered, a lot of the desire to learn more. In Utah, I just saw a very, very small part of that battle. So I wanted to know what else had gone on there. I've been doing a lot of research, and I've retired as well from Hitachi. I still have an emeritus title, but I'm retired, and so I'm got time now to spend researching it. And the research tools are amazing with the internet and all that. So finding quite a bit. And what I want to do is to honor these men that were killed. I'm going to try to post something on their, there's a web page for all the KIAs, several web pages, and I'd like to maybe post some of my comments on those pages.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. Just the last question I have, was there anything that you carried with you into combat that carried sentimental value, was given to you by somebody that you just felt like was a good luck charm or you had to have on you when you were there?
That's interesting. When I left for Vietnam, my brother-in-law, George Suda, is a very good Christian. He gave me a pocket Bible to take with me. Okay, and when I got to Vietnam, I kept it with me. And then as I worked with the Korean Tiger Division, South Korean Tiger Division, I got to know a chaplain, a Korean chaplain there. And when I was leaving to rotate from Quy Nhon to Chu Lai, he came to see me, and he gave me a Bible, a small pocket Korean Bible. And so I didn't have anything, so I just gave him the Bible that my brother-in-law had given me. And although I don't read Korean, I kept that Bible in my shirt pocket, especially when I went out to these operations. And years later, when I was doing business in Korea, I tried to contact him, and I found out that he had moved to Durham, North Carolina, and had started a very large Christian church there. Wow. And so, anyway, that's kind of that's what I carried with me.
The Korean language.
I couldn't read it because it was in Korean, but nonetheless, I kept.
That's a great story. Well, thank you very much, Hubert. I appreciate your time. I wish you the best of luck with the book. I know it'll be important and valuable to a lot of people. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this combat story. If you want to tell your own story, go to combatstory.com. If you know someone we should interview, send me their info at ryan@combatstory.com. Hearing these stories can be tough or bring back your own memories. If you're battling PTSD, please call the Veteran Crisis Line at 1-800-273-8255. 273-8255. Stay safe.